Let's stop to think how unique we really are. In the eyes of many in the world, this every 4-year ceremony we accept as normal is nothing less than a miracle. Mr. President, I want our fellow citizens to know how much you did to carry on this tradition. By your gracious cooperation in the transition process, you have shown a watching world that we are a united people, pledged to maintaining a political system which guarantees individual liberty to a greater degree than any other. And I thank you and your people for all your help in maintaining the continuity which is the bulwark of our republic.
All right, thank you. Yeah, that's the one thing people need to really comprehend. We are a republic. We are not a democracy. Democracy is the devil's word, and that it means you have no rights. That means you are a slave to the system. You don't have rights. And that's what I'm going to get reading here in a minute, because the corporations were formed, and when you get to Executive Order 2040, you're a corporation. And what amazes me is how come people don't pay attention to what's really going on around them. And it is disturbing when it comes down to it, because they don't educate their children. They put their children in harm's way when they think they're doing something good. It's like with DHS. People think that, oh, we're going to go through psychological evaluations. We're going to be protecting our children. We're going to be doing this because these people say that we need to do this to protect our children. But you have to comprehend the reality, and I mean reality, that those men and women are out to make a living off of you. They don't care about you. And as soon as you accept that, you'll get a lot further ahead. I've talked to several people the last week, again, dealing with some of their cases and issues. And to me, it's very interesting when these men and women don't comprehend the truth that they're trying to explain to their children. Everybody wants to talk about, something religious, but religion has nothing to do with the Constitution. The Constitution was written to protect you. And if you don't comprehend that the Constitution was there to protect you, then you've lost it. Because the Constitution has been always there to protect you, even from religious points of view. And that includes when these men and women out there claim, oh, we got to stop abortion. And people get upset with that because people are saying that we need to stop abortion. Well, excuse you. Women have the right to their body. If they lose their right to the body, then men don't have a right to their body. The Bible says the woman is your slave. The Bible says the women have no rights. And that's the one thing that most of your ministers and your God-fearing people teach this, to bow and kneel on the floor. I don't bow and kneel to anybody, and I'm not going to go do it for so-called a book. That people are trying to convince me of religion. And once you really comprehend that religion is not there to protect you, the Constitution is there to protect you under the Republican form of government, republic form of government. And so when that republic form of government is protecting you, you have to protect the republic form of government. And so that means when you have elected and public servants who are honorable, we need to protect them. The ones who are not honorable, we don't protect them. Because that's the one thing that these men and women are out there doing this stuff and taking away your rights to your freedom, taking your rights to your children. And that is what's disturbing to me, because when it comes down to it, when people sit there and say that, oh, we need to stop abortion, well, okay, great. But you're doing that and saying that because of your religious convictions and or beliefs. That's the one thing that is so frustrating, that a woman has a right to her body, a man has a right to his body. So, and then you're telling women that if they get molested or raped or anything, they're supposed to toughen up and live through it? See, that's it's just amazing to me how these people think. It disturbs me that people think that women are just materialistic points of view. And that's pretty much a lot of people think. And it is a reality. It is not a fiction. And so if a woman does not have a right to her body, then you don't have a right to yours. It's that simple. The Constitution is equal. There is no racism in Constitution law. There is no segregation in Constitution law. And that's the one thing that people do not comprehend, the facts of reality. Everybody wants to have an opinion. Well, see, opinions are like diapers, and I preached that for God since I was a kid. Opinions are like diapers. Everybody needs them changed. And so that's like when you go to a court system, they're doing an opinion. What about the facts of the case? Where is the evidence? I don't want your opinion. Why would I want an opinion? And that's the one thing that people have got to realize when they're going to court and filing your instruments. You know, and if the judge writes back to you and dismisses your case, then you take it to another judge, a higher court system. And that's the one thing that people do not comprehend. Everybody goes, oh, I want to go fight it in court. Well, when you go to these kangaroo court systems, what are you fighting? Who are you fighting? So you got to realize you're fighting yourself when it comes to a lot of this stuff, not the system. Because even the Supreme Court ruling, and this is Penhallow versus Dunn's Administrators, 3US541 LED 673 DAL 54. And this goes back to the Supreme Court in 1795. And it says each government, every government is an artificial person. That's why when people use this word person, and I've argued with many, many people, go, oh, Ed, you don't know what the word person means. It doesn't mean what you say it means. Yes, it does. It's an inanimate object. It does not exist. It's not in reality. The Supreme Court has made it more clarified in more than one case. And also, too, the artificial person is an obstruction, and a creator of the mind only. So that is the one thing that people have got to comprehend. The government cannot interface only with other artificial persons. And I keep bringing that up all the time. Your government employees don't have a right to have contact with you unless you authorize it. A lot of people think that they're brought up that these men and women are superior and we're supposed to listen to them and we're supposed to be doing all this stuff and do what they tell us. No, that is not true. See, that is the one thing that unless you want to be jailed or be harassed, you don't listen to these men and women. I don't give a damn if it's your mother, father, twin brother, twin sister, whatever, because all these men and women do it for their own personal financial gain. And this is the one thing that most people are learning, and it is getting to the point where people are learning this more and more. Because that's the one thing that's why it always says notice to principal is notice to agent. Notice to agent is notice to principal. This is a private email message. Okay, so when you're doing this and you're putting that in your letters or private emails, your cover letter, and that comes under by electronic communication privacy 18 USC 52510-2521. See, we do have some of these men and women that have put administrative rules in to not only protect themselves, but to protect ourselves, to protect us. And this is the beauty about our elected and public employees that are honorable. And we are realizing that slowly some public employees are being more honorable today than they were. They are getting more proper education in the legal system of Article I courts versus the Article III courts. And so when you get to comprehend, and I'm dealing with a few people right now in a couple other court cases, and trying to, they're getting it. And I mean, when I went through some of their paperwork, it's like, quit using the word defend it. You are not defending yourself. If you're using the word defendant, you're using a corporation structure that says that the judge can do whatever he wants to you. If you are the injured man or woman, now you have rights. If you are protecting a child, now you have rights. See, that is the one thing that the only lawful or legal man or woman could protect their children. An artificial identity is called an elected and public employee. That's a judge, a cop, or anybody like that, a county clerk. So they are not real technically if they're not honoring their oath. They are a corporation member. They're representing a corpse. And see, that's the one thing that people don't comprehend. That it's a corpse. So it's a dead body. So what are you doing? How come you're not protecting, yourself and those around you? And everybody goes, well, we have to protect, the corporation. Well, the corporation does not be protected like the United States of America. And if you go back in real history, it's called the United States for America. They altered that when the Democrats started changing things again back in 1980 or 1780. And so when you look back in the history of how these things have developed and why these men and women go by, the Black Law Dictionary, Bouvier Dictionary, and all these structures. Black Law Dictionary, basically, they wrote that Black Law Dictionary in the 13th century. They never expected people to take it. It was the jokers of the court that wrote it up. They were making jokes, and that was part of the court structure back then because the king owned you. You don't have a right to even your own fart because the king owns everything. And so that's where people get confused, where I was talking to a couple people the last few days dealing with, what is that called? The Magna Carta, 1213. And so when people go, I get to use the Magna Carta, well, the Magna Carta, if you really read the Magna Carta and comprehend it, that's for a foreign country. So in other words, you're saying that you are under the Vatican. You are under the structure of the Pope. I don't believe in that structure 100%. I don't believe in it, period, because I don't believe in organized religion, organized criminals, and that's what they are. They're not friends of yours. They're not family, and they're not structured because their job is to make a living off of you. And that means they don't have to work. They want you to cook your food. They want you to grow their food. They want you to maintain them. And so that's the saddest part. When are people going to start maintaining themselves and their own children? How come this is not a reality today? How come the schools and public utility buildings and city parks and city buildings and stuff don't have a lot of fruit trees? A lot of them have been cut down and taken out since the 1980s. Most of them, cities, parks had a lot of fruit trees around. Some of them even had gardens planted. And that's the one thing that always disturbs me with, what do they call that, food share? How come food share directors are sitting on their butt making $70,000 a year, not growing food in the property that's there? I've seen a couple in the state of Oregon that tried to do that, but after they started doing that, they gave up. And because they gave up, that is the frustration that everybody's living with. Because they failed to show the example that they are to be a public servant and to grow food and show the example. So they're showing an example by sitting on their butt, going out asking for handouts instead of going out and fixing the food. It's like collecting rainwater. You got a lot of these states that are saying, well, if you collect rainwater, that's a crime now. Excuse you, folks, it's not a crime. And if you get technical, and this one has even been produced in a court case, which I got to find again, that the rain that comes off your roof, that you own it because you pay taxes on that. So you own that water. That's the lies that we live with these mothers today. because they sit there and say, oh, we own the God's water, or the Great Spirit, the Creator, Mother Earth, for those who are believing in religion. Because like I said to a lady here today, when we were talking about writing up the criminal charges on her kids being taken over, and she's like, well, I don't want to do all that work. I'll just go pray to God. And like I say all the time to people, well, when you go meet God, tell him to call me. Because, you know, it's like, you know, you could have something of belief of here, but you have something else on the other hand here, and that's the point, is it real or not? And so it's like, you know, how do we have to live in all this fantasy that we're created and controlled by the system? That's like Executive Order 2040 that took away the rights of lawful and legal. So if you don't file your rights and own yourself, clarify your birth certificate that you are a living man and woman. File it and make sure it's publicly done. And you go get people that says, oh, you don't want to file that publicly, you want to stay on the private side. Well, I agree with that to a point. To a point, but you want to file it, and you want to make it public so that way you are not the corpse. You are not a person. You are a living man and woman. So it's like when I talk on the phone to people, it is correcting your English or your wording. Because people all the time will say, well, Ed, aren't you a person? And I always say, no. I'm not a dead entity. I'm not a corpse. That's like a signature. Signature is a dead entity. An autograph has value. Because an autograph has value, like when stars or different people that will do an autograph, now all of a sudden that has value compared to a signature. And, you know, it depends on the way you look at signatures and the way you look at the value of autographs. But, you know, that is a structure that is defined by the man or woman, or what the financial gain is for that man or woman. And so that's the one thing we wanted to definitely make clear to everybody. We are not lawyers. We are not attorneys. We're not judges. Well, we can be judge people in our ways. You know, and that's the other point to bring in your point. Taxes are voluntary, no matter what people try to explain to you. I get emails from people all the time that tell me, oh, come on, Ed, there's the law. It's like, no, 16th Amendment was never passed. It was never ratified. They passed it administratively after the Bankruptcy Act of the Corporation of England, the British banks. So this is the one thing to know, real history, because the national debt is what the British government owes you and me on this soil for destroying and taking away our trees, our deer, our elk, our food resources, our wildlife, our lives, our freedoms, putting us into mandatory slavery as they do, because everybody thinks that you're a slave, so you have to go with the structure and comply and do all this crazy, stupid stuff. And so it is one of those things, people, that, you know, what do you really know? How do you know to protect yourself? And this is the one thing that we try to do and with other people to get the information out. We do have a lot of other people, that men and women, that we do work with across the country for educational purposes on these things, because that's the whole point, educating each man and each woman on the reality of the truth. So that is the one thing when we go back in real history of this country, that they don't want. Remember, your school districts, your public employees don't want you to have real history because they want you to be a slave. They want you to bow your head. They want you to believe in fake religions. They want you to believe in, you know, the structure of tooth fairies, Christmas, all this stuff that is man-made fiction. And it is man-made fiction. And so that's what we're living today in some regards, is man-made fiction. And so when people don't sit there and pay attention to what their life is going on, what's happening in their life, and that's the one thing that once we're able to put the structure on the QVC accounts and stuff, you know, we'll get that out. But we want to make sure that we don't want to put ourselves or you in a legal liable issue, because we want to make sure that we're not following the train, because I'm not out making a personal income like some people are that are selling these packages. to the unsuspected man or woman out there in the world and in this country. There's a lot of countries that are starting to follow that path, getting people into the troubles and convictions of these things. And that's the one thing that you have to realize, that when you do this stuff, you end up in a liability issue. And you are the insured party if that happens to you when you file the paperwork and do all this. But see, also, too, you have to realize that you're supposed to be the smart man or woman. You're not supposed to do this to yourself. So when you do this to yourself, you put yourself in a financial position, a legal position. And that's the one thing that you got to remember. Legal is foreign agents, foreign corporation, not Americans. And once we start comprehending that and educating more and more people like we are doing, slowly, but some people want to fight. I've had so many people that run to me and they need help, and they run to you and they run to other people. And then all of a sudden, all they do is talk religion. And it's like, do you want to solve the issue here, or do you want religion? If you want religion, go talk to your pastor and see what he can do for you legally. See, that's the one thing that, until about 40 years ago, 50, 60 years ago, way back when the communities were working together more and more than they are today, being so separated by the influx of immigration that's coming in and terrorizing this country. Yes, immigration terrorizes us. They take our food. They take our homes. They take our housing. They take our trees, our deer, our wildlife, for not only their own personal gain, but for their own pleasure. And so that is the one thing, that this country is the greatest country in the world because we have the Constitution, and there's no other place in existence that has the Constitution, founding structure the way we have to protect you and I, the lawful bloodline Native Americans, versus legal citizens. And so when we start realizing that legal citizens have privileges, no rights, and the ALCU works for the British government. They don't work for you. I know that personally. I mean, I was told by even my own case that the ALCU was looking at taking it up 4 years ago and 6 years ago. And all I did was get a runaround from these people. And that's what you're going to get around from these people. Oh, we only have so many attorneys that we hire. Oh, that's right. We're volunteer attorneys. We don't hire anybody, but that's a lie. They hire people. And don't forget, that's the one thing that you want to do in your state, is you want to ask your Secretary of State and your Treasury how much the state funds pay the ALCU to attack you. Because they say they live on donations. Yeah, they do. Off bar members, they live on donations from your elected and public tax funds that when you go in and pay fees, they collect money on that. They collect other structure that takes away from you, the lawful Native Americans. It's like all these ALCU people are out there fighting on immigration, that is fighting and says, oh, we need to pay attention to these immigrant people. They have it so hard and rough what they came from. And we're such a plush country. We have all this rights and freedom. Well, I'm going to tell you a little point here. Sometimes it makes you wonder what rights and freedom you got when these cops are literally shooting Americans in the street for personal and financial gain. We do have videos that I believe we posted up, and I've watched several that have come out from different agencies that police officers have bluntly stated on national TV and in YouTube videos, hey, we like murdering people, basically is what they say, because we get paid time off. We get paid time off. And one cop actually said in one video, he goes, sure, I murder people because it's financial benefit for me. He gets time off, and plus they get bonuses because of that, because now you got a straw man account that has been eliminated. So because of that, here comes the financial structure. So how do people deal with this stuff? That's what we're trying to get to the bottom of these things. We got to make sure that people comprehend the education, knowledge to deal with these things. So that's why we do all this work out there for you and bring this stuff to you. Not only us, but other men and women do the same thing. And I do thank all those other men and women that have sent me information that we have put together and made sure that was publicly out there and made sure that people comprehended it. And that is the one thing with it, is realizing that these court cases and stuff go back to the foundation of this country. And so when you look at it and people say, well, we're supposed to have these rights, well, these court cases are your rights. And that's the one thing that you've got to comprehend, that these court cases you need to use. People say, stay away from their administrative rules. Well, I like using their administrative rules to prove to them that they have an employment contract. Here's the job that they described. Here's the job that they signed on to. Here's the job they took an oath to. It's an employment contract. They don't have rights. Public employees don't have rights. Public employees cannot take the Fifth Amendment. County commissioners, sheriff's deputies, all public employees cannot have an attorney. They cannot hire an attorney. By state and federal law, they are supposed to defend themselves. See, that's one thing, that when they get in trouble, they're supposed to defend themselves, but they go in and convince the general public that they need to hire an attorney. So when they hire an attorney, you're paying for that attorney. How come they don't have the knowledge and education to defend themselves when they get in trouble? See, those are questions that we need to be asking. And we need to be asking, why are they violating their constitutional oath? And that's the one thing that you feel folks are finally doing. You're getting it out there. You know, I post information all day long. I pass the knowledge and education on all day long. And so that's the one thing, that when we're passing this information and people are getting it, you know, they are freaking out. They are standing up on it. But it's interesting because you get to watch these people that will come out, these public employees that will say, well, I pay taxes. Well, by federal law, under Executive Order 2040 in the Bankruptcy Act, when the dollar bill was created as a financial institution called the British Bank, Federal Reserve, they have to. That's their administrative rules. That's the regulation to get that fake money. That's the transfer of that promissory note. And it's interesting because, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people that will pass promissory notes back and forth to each other and say, well, I need a promissory note so that way I have a promissory that you're going to pay me this, so I have it, so if I want to use it as credit, I can use it as credit. People, please, don't get caught up in those things like that. Because when you're doing fake promissory notes like that, you know, or, you know, on your property or stuff, you're talking very heavy legal issues. And these are things that you want to stay away from, these legal issues. So everybody says, I want my day in court. Well, I like to say, well, if you want your day in court, just another fool there, because you want the case dismissed, or you want it handled behind the back door, so it is, you know, if you get a ward check, you don't want to make that public. You don't want to be in the newspaper about that you got this major lawsuit and all this stuff and the stuff. You want that side needs to stay private. Because if it's in the private back door of the courts, it stays private when you have the wins. And that's the one thing that we want to keep somewhat private. Now, we do have a bulletin board on new.org and trackers that we do notices, and we put that stuff up. If people want to make sure that they want to make it public, or they have a public notice they want to put on, we'll put it on new.org and trackers. Now you have legal record publicized. On Facebook, you have it in our website. Because remember, the Supreme Court stated anything that you produce on Facebook is public, can be used against you in a court of law. That's why it stuns me and amazes me all the time when all these people put all these personal things up, or their, you know, photos of their kids. And it's interesting that, you know, I've seen people that, you know, their kid wiped out on a bike, and they'll post that up, and then DHS takes their kid for child abuse. And then they're trying to find out who to blame. Well, shit, how do you blame anybody? You're the one who posted it. So you can't blame people for what you do. And people don't get that. They do it to themselves a lot of times. They open their mouth. They talk to people they shouldn't talk to. They tell people, strangers in the grocery store, what's up. And so when you make things certain public, that's why, it's very cautious when you talk to people. You have to be very cautious when you do things. You have to pay attention to what you are doing, not what everybody else is doing. Too many people don't pay attention to what they're doing. They pay attention to the structure that they hear on TV, radio, news. Everybody gets emotionally involved, which is really frustrating. Because when you get emotionally involved, you're not being realistic. Because you're letting a feeling decide your decisions instead of your mind. And that's what happens to a lot of people when they end up in court on these things. And so when you end up in court on these issues, you want to get a simple win. You want to walk away as the victor. And people go, well, I need my day in court to make sure all this is known. Well, sometimes it's better not to make sure it's known and just get it done and go on and get on with your life. That's much simpler than making everything publicly known, or it gets drugged around in other situations and other things that can harm you. So paying attention to what administrative rules are. And you need to do that in like federal administrative rules of criminal procedure. It's on the internet. Look it up. Read the federal criminal procedure when you're going to these courts if you're filing criminal charges on these men and women. You need to comprehend what the court system says about it. Not your emotions, not your feelings. See, once you comprehend how the court system thinks about it and works, then you're ahead of the game. But like I said, when you go back to feelings and emotions, you have no case when it comes down to feelings and emotions. And that's the one thing that, those questions could actually, if you end up in a Supreme Court, asked by a jury member. And that's the one thing that people need to know if they're going to be on a jury. They need to know the Constitution and the law. The judge has no authority in telling you anything or explaining the law to you. The judge cannot explain the law to you. That's not his job. They do that today so that way they can control your opinion on decisions, on convictions. Because how many convictions the judge gets, that goes for his, what is that called? His retirement pay increases. And you got to remember, in the private sector, they get bonuses all the time and stuff. And you pay for it. That's the one thing. When you go in and pay filing fees, you pay for it. That's why we do have up on new.org and trackers. If you're a lawful bloodline native, you're not supposed to pay filing fees. Because you have to be a man or a woman living to go to court. Technically, corporation courts are just for corpse. They're not for living men and women. And that's the one thing that when you start putting all this stuff together and start going, these things are very interesting, or I never thought about that opinion or that thought. And these are things that you need to think about, these opinions and thoughts. Because without you thinking about these opinions and thoughts, how are you going to present your case? How are you going to present your facts? And you have to realize that the only ones that could write an affidavit are living men and women, judges, artificial corporations, artificial persons. A person cannot write an affidavit. A person writes an affidavit, technically, it's thrown out of court because that's hearsay witness. I mean, that's the one thing I've been explaining to people this week about hearsay witnesses. And some people are getting it. But when you go into court, you can't say things unless you put it in writing and it's served to the court. And that's the one thing that people don't realize. When you do write an affidavit, you are legally liable for the words you use, including if it could be determined as slander. So you have to be cautious with the way you do things. You have to be cautious when you put this information out. You have to be cautious with what you are personally doing. And that's the saddest part. A lot of people are not cautious. They just do stuff, and then they wonder why they get themselves in trouble. And the one thing is in the legal terminology, you have to realize that one word means another thing, and another word means another thing. And sometimes the same word that they try to use has two different meanings. So you have to clarify that. So if a public employee that says and sends you a judgment, I'm dismissing your case or I'm dismissing this, you have to write back. And you have to put in your affidavit that you want them to explain their legal and Constitution views on the subject. You don't want them to get away with just sending you a letter that says, well, we're just passing it on. We're going to ignore it. And if you don't respond in 30 days, now that way it stands in by Commercial Code of 1963 international law. And that's the one thing that people got to realize. International law is not part of the United States. International law came basically in 1963, and it's not part of the United States. It's part of the United States, Inc., called the World Bank, but it's not part of we the people, because only a living man or woman could make things happen. I mean, it's like running down the street, you know. It's like, you know, you trip and fall. You feel it. You get to know what pain is, unfortunately. But sometimes we have to trip and fall before we wake up and pay attention, before we fly it straight or speak up on a matter of truth. And that's the one thing that people need to comprehend. You have to stay factual. You have to stay realistic. And you can't sit there and do hearsay witness stuff. And there's a lot of people that believe hearsay witness is acceptable in court. And that's why people get objections on them. Told you can't speak that in court. You can't present that evidence. And the other point is, you didn't present the evidence before you went to court, so it gets in the court record, and that's where the county clerk or the court recorder or the anybody who does the county filings, they're liable. And if they don't file your paperwork and you find out about it, you have to sue them. You have to file criminal charges for tampering, fraud upon the court, tampering with evidence. And if you haven't looked up federal law and tampering of evidence, each state basically is the same thing as the federal government. And that's a fact, because the federal government is the law of the land under the Constitution and the Indian treaties. And that's the one thing, the treaties are the law. The Constitution supersedes and holds the treaties to administrative rules of the law. Not statute, codes, and administrative rules. That's what your elected and public employees are supposed to do. Statute, codes, and administrative rules, they took an oath to uphold. They took an oath to make sure they know a separation of lawful and legal. Legal immigration, illegal immigration, and who's lawful bloodline native. So all these things have a factor when you go to court, when you're playing this stuff. And so that's part of what we're going to get into tomorrow night on the Fourth Amendment. Because, like I said, we are doing a series on all the amendments, and we're going to let you know what has been ratified, what is not, what's legal, what's lawful. And that is the one thing that people need to comprehend. What the truth is versus the fantasy or imagination that we have been prescribed to live. And once you comprehend that, you get so much further ahead in life. And the one thing you always do question a public servant, you always do that. You ask them where they get their authority. Especially when it comes to DHS, where do they get their authority to kidnap children? The Supreme Court came out and stated very clearly that you need a warrant to take a kid. And that's taken 50 years to get that back on the books. Sorry, I ended up beating myself out somehow. But that is the one thing that comes to this whole structure, is so long as that once you start filing your paperwork, you know, you have to file it in an affidavit form. You have to present and inform yourself and the injured, the party that injured you, what your intentions are. And that is the one thing that people have to do. Because you can't sit there and say, well, I'm going to do it this way, and, my rights matter more than your rights. Well, the Constitution gives man and woman equal rights. We do know for a fact how they abuse people's men and women's rights. That's a fact. We watch them get abused each and every day. And we've all been watching this for a long time. And this is where we need to stand together with one another. And that's where, when these people have got these court cases and they got these grand juries that they're trying to claim, I'd like to see a grand jury that has been formed that in each one of the states or whatever that actually has worked. I've been watching this where people have been talking about forming grand juries for 25, 30 years, going through all this structure, all this stuff, and then when it comes down to it, people don't even know their own rights. So that is the point that you have to know your rights. It's your responsibility. It's not mine. It is not somebody else's responsibility. It's your responsibility. And that's why when people go hire an attorney and then they get, things don't work with an attorney. And that is the one thing that, it always disturbs me when these people go after abortion and say how people are murdering these children. Get off your mind, BS. People get murdered each and every day, shot by police officers, and you don't give a shit. People get murdered in other countries, and you don't give a shit. But then when a child is aborted, and everybody wants to make an issue out of it, grow up, children. That's what I'm saying to you. Grow up. You're deciding somebody else's fate in life, and you get to play God? It's not your decision to play God. You're not in a position to even assume that somebody else has a different right than you. There is no different right. The Constitution is equally evolved to each and every man and woman. It is not a separation of church and state. Yes, it is of the Constitution. That's why I don't believe in your religion. I won't accept your religion. I don't believe in anything that came from a book that came from a foreign country. Well, some I do. I don't mean it that way, but I mean especially religious stuff and Bibles. I don't get into that stuff. It's mind control. And you have to realize that. I mean, it's like, and most people do, and some people comprehend the Bible. I keep getting people that, educate me a little bit more and more on these things. It does have some interesting things that goes back. But then again, how do we know who wrote the Bible? How do we know the structure? Everybody keeps saying, well, Jesus wrote it, or Jesus didn't write it. It was written 400 years after time. That was even proved by the Vatican and the Church of Rome. So, and then all their scrolls that they came and wrote after that, that's like the Magna Carta. And then they had to do the Magna Carta because, the saints were out there murdering everybody because there was no more killing and people weren't living in fear of the church anymore. So they weren't donating and giving their homes, and they weren't giving their weekly contributions to the church anymore. So they had to create something to go after that. And that's the one thing that people have got to realize. What do these church members do for us? What do these churches do for you? I mean, that's the saddest part, because one day, or years back, the church used to have a door open. The church used to be public. They're not public anymore. They never have been, really, technically. They're private property, as they claim. But technically, churches are not private property because they're publicly owned, because it's a church. See, that's the one thing, that public land that the church claims that they don't own public land. They can't own public land because the church is not a living man or woman. See, only living man and women, and in some cases, children, can own land and property and personal possessions. And that is the one thing that people have got to get that through their minds to comprehend that this is the way it is. Public land is public. That's to everybody. You can't be arrested for trespassing on public land because it's not filed as private land, because it cannot be filed as private land because it's owned by a corporation that is not living man or woman or human. And I'll even go so far, the Pope and the priests, they're not human. Because if they had human compassions, they wouldn't be doing half the stuff that they do to go against man and woman. Everybody wants to keep you in the blind spot, to keep you so that way you're mind controlled. And they do a damn good job of that today. People are heavily mind controlled on what's going on. And people don't get that one at all. And that is the saddest part that's going on right now today. Because people are not comprehending what some of the structure is because of all this media structure that's in their face. And that's the one thing that is so sad, because we've got to teach the control of these men and women that are doing this to you and I. And they're doing it to your children. I mean, the school districts are definitely not educating the children. They're not teaching the structure, what's going on in the real life. And so that is the one thing that people are not paying attention. And by the way, for the news flash, President Trump just donated his fourth quarterly salary again to more nonprofits. Donald Trump has paid off 1/4 of the national debt out of his own pocket. But will the Democrats tell the truth? Hell no, because they have to have your brainwashed going. We don't want abortions. We have to have religion control over you. That's what disturbs the hell out of me. The hell is religion control? And that's what most people don't comprehend, because they go into these things and they're controlled mentally. How many people make their own free decision? Responsible decision, not choices. See, choices give you an excuse to get out of your decision of responsibility for the facts of whatever you might do. And that is the one thing that we are dealing with right now today. And this is a frustrating piece that we're dealing with today. Because, like I said, we've got all these things, and everybody says, my money shouldn't pay for abortions. My money shouldn't pay for this or that. My money shouldn't pay for immigration. Excuse you, do the research. If you're paying income taxes voluntary, who are you paying? See, that's the one thing you've got to comprehending. Who are you paying? What is really going on the structure? And that's where you need to figure out these things. And so that's the one thing that we're all working on, and that's the one thing that we all need to put together, is putting this stuff in history, because, like I said, we are the only place in the world that has a constitution. People say, oh, wait a minute, Canada has a constitution. Their constitution, I believe, was written in 1996. Totally different. Totally different. And so that is the one thing that when you step back out and watch what's really happening in the productions of what life is around you, then you get to know a little bit more. I've been watching some of these things like on American Greed, how these churches are taking advantage of these people of religion are ripping each other off in the name of God. And they got a lot of really good, interesting stuff on the internet that you can watch on this stuff, and how people misuse with the God or the structure of that and the system. And that is the one thing, the system wasn't written for you. The system was written for the system to protect you from them. And so that is the valuable point, and a valuable education is to comprehend that they're sitting there supposed to be doing this to protect you. And so when they're not doing this to protect you, that's where we're losing this structure. That's like it's with all this stuff, with all these court cases everybody's been filing. How come these men and women who have been putting these court cases around on the internet ain't putting it as an affidavit for anybody else that could autograph that and agree with the charges or disagree with the charges? See, and that's the one thing that people don't want to have, the structure where people could disagree with them. And you have to realize that we are literally living that today. Because people don't want a lot of people to disagree with them on what they're saying, because if they disagree, they might have a better case or might be able to defer your case. Because here's what the law says, and so this is the reaction and stuff that we have to go by. And people are not paying attention to that either. You know, it's like under USC 28 Section 3002, Article 1580. It's been, well, now they're claiming it's been changed, but also, too, it's a United States corporation, not a landmass. And remember, when they use the word land, that's above your head. That is not the land or soil you stand on. See, it is interesting with the legal points of view, and that's where I suggest to people, you got to learn the lawful legal points of these things. And if you don't learn the lawful and legal structure, and so many people say, well, I don't need to do that. Well, you do need to know that. You need to know the Constitution before you know the Bible. You need to know statute codes and administrative rules, how it affects you before you know the Bible. That's my belief, because the Bible doesn't save men and women. The Constitution saves men and women. And that's where you need to comprehend, without men and women saving each other and the children and protecting your bloodline and protecting your security of your soil and your personal property, belongings. Personal property is the same thing as a child. Child is personal property. That's your blood. Your blood gave that life to that child. And so that is the one thing that people have got to accept, that part. Oh, and then people say, and that's where we're going to get back to the abortion issue. Well, okay, now we need to stop this for abortion. The child has the right. Excuse me. The mother has the right to her body. The mother has the right to know what she has to deal with. The mother has the right to know if she can handle it. And then you get people that will say, well, God knows better, and if God doesn't want the child born, he will make sure that the woman doesn't have a child. Well, I hate to tell you about that lie bullshit. And that's what it is, bullshit. It's a lie. Because, you know, God doesn't predict those things. The woman's body does, knows how to eject it and stuff. The woman's body has the control over it. Oh, that's like, you know, so many people go, well, I'm going to pray to God. God's going to take care of me. Okay, well, we all been done that. We all do that. Everybody's prayed to God at one point. All right, we get all that. We know the circumstances of it. But the bottom line is that when you prayed, what happened? Did your case get dismissed? Did you get your child back? Sometimes, miraculously, those type of things happen, but somebody behind the back door in the court systems made that happen. So somebody caught it and realized that they weren't going to commit fraud or go along with the extension of fraud. And so, and those things really do happen. People do pay attention when these things go into court systems. You know, and then you got a lot of people out there that are making an income off the court systems because they know how many of these court cases, when they get out there, they make a living off of it. So like I said, and when it comes to the judge retiring, that's how he makes his income. On him, ice on him. Every time you file something in that court case has a filing price tag on it. And people say, oh, no, it don't. Yes, it does. See, once you start doing that and getting that through the structure on filing, and then I want to get into how we're going to start filing dismissals. Because everybody goes, well, I need to file a motion. Well, a motion is a ship on the ocean. It goes up and down, and it goes around, and the attorneys and judges get to decide if a motion gets passed. And trust me, your attorney sometimes will sit with a judge and the opposing party in a closed room or on conference line talking about your case. And legally, that is a crime. Because the case cannot be discussed without the client there or the injured man or woman there. See, it's so personally to know how the words are used. It's so personal to know the circumstances, to do your circumstances to protect your bloodline. And like I preach all the time, if you don't protect your bloodline, then who is supposed to protect it? That is your responsibility to protect your bloodline, your child. It's your child, it's not mine. And people, that's where I get into the abortion issue, because now you're saying that, now you're claiming that the woman doesn't have rights. And then if you're going to claim the woman doesn't have rights to her body, that means you have no rights, period. You're not above any other man or woman because of somebody's rights that you think. Rights are 100% guaranteed across the board. And once you realize that they are across the board guaranteed, then what the hell are we fighting with? I don't get why everybody wants to talk about abortion. If you quit talking about it and quit playing the damn abortion game, women probably won't have as many abortions as what they are today, but everybody's going through financial strains, panicking, trying to figure out life, trying to figure out circumstances. And so you're attacking them and prejudging them without letting them live their own life. Who gives one authority to tell somebody else how to live their life? See, we don't have the right to dictate to one another how to live somebody else's life or to dictate to somebody how they should live their life. It is not our responsibility or your responsibility to tell somebody that they don't have a right to whatever they have in their problem with their life. And so if a woman wants an abortion, that is her right. It's her body. I don't go with this religious point of view going, well, the woman doesn't have a right to her body. I'm going to be hitting that with beating a dead horse on that one. Because that's the one thing, the woman has the right to her body. Okay, and then when women get assaulted and all this other terrible things that happens to women and nobody protects them, I mean, I grew up in the streets, man. I watched some of these violent things happen. And I was always there. I always took out the guy that hurt the woman or something like that. And, you know, there was times that I was blessed and lucky I didn't get brought up on charges for what I did. But we have the right to protect and defend one another when we're getting harmed. I don't care what some public employee says. I don't care what some judge will tell you. Because a judge works for you. Your courts work for you. That's why when you go into courts, you're not supposed to pay court fees. So long as you're a lawful bloodline native. We have that up on the website. I just passed that out, I don't know, probably 40, 50 times this week. Because people were asking, prove it. Well, here's the administrative rule. Here's the law. And now you need to go prove your court case. You need to go prove how it works then. That's your responsibility to prove. See, that's the one thing that people don't get when it comes down to that. You have to prove these things. And so when you go to court, it's proving these things by a written affidavit. So only a living man or woman could do it. Artificial persons cannot do it. Corporations are dead bodies. They can't do it. So that's the problem we're living, and that's when we're going to get into Article 4 tomorrow night. We've already done the first 3 articles in the Constitution. We're going to do all 27 of them. because people need to realize and accept the points that were passed by law or administrative rules. What is administrative rules? That's a man-made control. That's like when President Bush was telling everybody, well, we don't want the law of the jungle, we want the law of man. We want the law of the jungle. Because the law of man is religion, and that's what they hide before. See, it's stepping out and putting these things together and realizing what the truth and what the words mean. I don't want the religious point of view. I want the law of the jungle. Because that's what we're supposed to do, is take that law of the jungle and protect our families. Somebody comes in and harms your family. What are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to call the cop. The cop's going to protect me. Cops will tell you, don't call us first, defend yourself. Cops do that. You know it. I know that. So, and that's what we need to do, is protect ourselves, protect our children, protect the families. And so when we do this information and get it out, and everybody's starting to get more and more, I mean, and it's like when these police officers offend somebody and you are a witness to those things, please write the affidavit on the spot while your fresh mind is happening. I've been there. I've been assaulted by police officers. I've had guns shoved in my face by cops. I've had them where they try to beat me to death. Okay, I've been there where other people have been through that problem, and I was a witness or they were a witness of me. And see, a lot of these things I've learned hard. I learned how to make sure that affidavits started getting written and the truth of all this stuff, how to do it. Because I had to learn to protect myself and other people around when I see criminal activities. So that's what you need to do, is protect yourself when you see criminal activities. And you need to protect your family, your neighbors, men and women who are standing up beside you or with you. That's like when USC Code 28, judiciary and judicial procedure. And that's where, you know, under the Department of United States, Inc., attorneys or marshals, you know, are the structure of the incorporation. The marshals, the United States Marshals, are the only law enforcement agency that is recognized. That was put in place by former commander George Washington, your first actual president. And he put that in so that way we had recourse. These men and women, the United States Marshals, are not supposed to be the sheriffs in the court, it's supposed to be marshals in the court. And they're supposed to make sure that the judge does not violate his oath of servitude or anybody else in that courtroom. And that's where the sheriffs have taken over, but they haven't taken over and done anything rational or reasonable, because they're corporation men, and that's how they run today. They run to keep a nonprofit jail going that's privately owned by attorneys, lawyers, judges, and your local politicians. And that means your business owners. And I always like it because I think a politician shouldn't have a business if he's in politics. If he's elected official, why the hell is he double dipping? You know, I mean, if he wants a business, do the business. Because you're going to tell me that man or woman is honorable? I don't believe that. Because that man or woman is not honorable, because if he's running a business that makes financial gain, like a lot of them do with their children's services agencies, their nonprofits they have, running these left for their children. They have drug and alcohol programs that they own the corporations to, that they vote and make these decisions. I truly believe that elected and public employees shall not vote, period. Because all they do is like being on a jury, is they vote for themselves. They look at the options for personal and financial gain. So without that, how are they benefiting you in the community when they're out for personal and financial gain? And so that's the one thing that we've got to step back and watch this stuff. Because I do plan on hitting quite a few good things tomorrow on this. And see, this is the one thing. Your First Amendment protects your Second Amendment. Your Second Amendment protects all your amendments. And when you hear all these radical idiots out there, all these idiots that come out and say that, oh, you know, we have to protect this or that. We have to protect our families first, your bloodline first. And so if you don't start protecting your bloodline first, there is no future. You have no future. You have no grandchildren. You have no legacy to pass on. Who's going to have your legacy to pass on if you don't sit there and do that? And see, that is the one thing that we're all working on this together. We're all educating each other, passing information back and forth. And that is the one thing how these things get done is by each other passing this stuff down, so we're protecting one another. And so it is moving. These men and women are getting afraid. They are getting scared. They are getting nervous because they're seeing more and more people coming together. They are seeing more and more people filing their affidavits, not a complaint. A complaint is a whining statement. And once you accept that a complaint is a whining statement, that's why I suggest to people that if you're doing a complaint, then take the complaint, copy it, put it in, you know, your Word file or whatever, your PDF structure, and write it. But then you have the complaint on the structure, their complaint, but you have your affidavit filed in that complaint. So they can't alter it. Because, see, that's the one thing that when you do a complaint, they get to have the decision to alter it, to allow what information that can be put into recorded record. And you don't want them to have a decision in your injured party structure. You don't want them to have a thought in it, except for doing their employment that they have to do, that they have a contract of the Constitution and the treaties to do. That's why they were hired. That's why they were employed. And see, that's the one thing that these men and women have been employed by you and I. That's part of the contract. We're the only place in the world that exists that has rights. Nobody else does in the world. So when that's the one thing, it is amazing. It's like everybody's going after Trump's resignations because all these Hollywood movie stars can't make the money they want to rape from you, steal from you. I mean, a lot of these things, I mean, you got a lot of performers that are publicly funded, and then they double dip on the thing. That's why it's so important to look at the CAFA reports. You know, that's why Walter Bruin has the CAFA reports on Walter Bruin, his site. Look at it. He's got the financial fundings up there of your cities and counties and states. It's like I suggest to people, where's the money going? Where is the money gone? And nobody wants to answer that question. I mean, I've got videos where I've questioned different things over the last 25 years, asking where this fund or that budget went to, asked for that funding, you know, where the money disappeared to, where did it go? And people say, well, you're wasting your time and effort, Ed. Well, are we really wasting our time and efforts? That is the one thing. You know, it's like the cops are saying that, oh, we have the right to tase an 8-year-old child. Bullshit. Cops should be taken out in the woodshed and taught a lesson. See, when they sit there and they're using this abuse to keep you quiet, to keep you shut down, to shut you up, to shut you down, so you don't have a right to your free speech. So you don't have a right to walk freely in our country. And so that is the one thing that, you know, I mean, it's interesting, you know. They come up with all these things that a child was having a pocket knife, so they had a taser to protect the child. Excuse me, what? I mean, you know, it was so simple to disarm anybody with a knife. Come on, people. And if that's there, and if it's a knife that they're using instead of like this, I mean, come on, all of us used to carry, or still do, most of us carry a knife on our hip, or at least a pocket knife, or 2 or 3 items like that. And so when you think about how these men and women are doing this to you and taking away your freedom and your rights of responsibility to your own children, once you start realizing that a public servant is not justified for their actions. I mean, how many people today have been shot going, well, I thought he had a gun or a knife on him, so I had the right to shoot him. Well, if we had the right to do that, there would be a lot more people shot on the street because everybody else would be walking in fear down the street. See, that is the one thing that is so disturbing when it comes down to this, that people are not paying attention to protecting their rights, their children, their circumstances, their security. You know, and that is the one thing. If you don't sit there and protect that right, you don't have a right. Neither does anybody else have a right, or even legal immigration that has the privilege. And see, we have to protect their right. We have to protect their structure. And see, if we don't protect their structure, how are we supposed to have them protect ours? And that's dealing with the public employees, what they're doing to us today, because they want us to conform. And that is the one thing that is interesting, because like on the East Coast, they're going through mandatory evacuations dealing with the hurricanes and stuff, which I don't comprehend, because if you know that you're going to have flooding, and if you know you live in that area, how come you don't have an underground bunker built? How come you don't have water pump systems so that way you can survive? But it is difficult when it gets flooded, because, you know, all that stuff is very expensive today. And then people say, well, we need to pass administrative rules, so if you're going to live here, you need to do all this stuff. So they make sure that prices and stuff is untouchable, out of range. You know, and most people don't get that. You are not untouchable. I mean, in the West Coast here, we are sitting here with radiation pouring in the ocean from Fukushima. We've got, you know, like the East Coast with Chernobyl and everything else leaking radiation, and people say, oh, that's acceptable. No, it's not. And see, what always disturbs me, how come you people are not sitting there when these things happen and going after them? It's like everybody's bitching, you know, about the pipelines going in. Okay, damn it, then grow up and be adults and start going after the board members. When those pipes leak in the area, you sue the board members personally for their assets, the liability, destruction of replanting, destruction of food resources that are lost, destroyed, taken away. And I don't see people sitting there doing that. I don't see people sitting there that are protecting one another in that capacity. How come people are not protecting one another against what's going on? Then we sit there, oh, that's a job, that's okay, we need employment, we need to feed the family, grow food, plant water, or plant food, collect rainwater. And we have already proven and got it verified, all your rivers and streams, at least in the state of Oregon, are owned by the people, not the corporations. The people own the resources. We've got that in public meeting on recorded record. So how do you solve these issues? They're simple to solve. That's where we, the people, need to stand up. That's where we, the people, it's our responsibility and liability to do this stuff. You know, and it's like the other point that disturbs me, all these people are asking for handouts. Well, how come the public employees are not paying the structure? Where's the funding? Who did they give that funding to? Where did it go? So that's the one thing that we need to be asking. Where is the money? Where is the funding? Where is the structure on these things? And so when we're not asking these questions, we're sitting there comprehending that it's okay. You're accepting these things. You're saying it's okay. You know, I mean, I've had my neighbors sat there and watch me be assaulted and stuff. Well, cops shouldn't assault you. They shouldn't arrest you. They shouldn't have kidnapped you. They shouldn't have done this. But would they stand up? Oh, no, I'm told by them, we own a business. We can't do that. Because if we stand up on that, you know, this is like the one thing that where people say Congress doesn't have the right dealing with native lands to protect them. Bullshit, they do too. It's called a treaty. But we know how uneducated the general public and how stupid people are. And we know a lot of these people that sit up there and say this because of lack of education. Because, see, that's the one thing that people don't have knowledge. And I watch this stuff all the time. And they don't get it. And those public employees do have authority and rights to protect the soil and the circumstances around you. That is their job and obligation. And so when people don't sit there and realize that they have a right to protect man and woman, they have a right to sit there and do this, you're allowing them to get away with it. You are stating and suggesting that they have a right. Now, a fictitious corporation does not exist. We know that. We know that with the structure of a fictitious corporation, that it's your responsibility to protect those around you. And that's, like I said, I'm starting to repeat myself, and I don't want to go down that line. So anyhow, I guess I'll go ahead and start opening this up, but I want you to realize that the one thing is no corporation has jurisdiction over a living man or woman or naturally born, natively born on the soil. And like I said, that was proven in the Supreme Court of the United States. Not Capitol Supreme Court of the United States all the way. You got to remember, when they use Capitol, that's an Article I court today. But it states 1795 that artificial person is an abstraction, doesn't exist. So that's what your corporations are. That's what your courts are. Until you get into an Article III court. In an Article III court, you actually have to have the judge have an authorized oath of servitude. You have to prove that he's got a filing record of financial funds. And so when you start doing that and start producing the facts that all of a sudden that people are bringing out there, you're realizing that this is reality that we're living. And it's like when all these actors and all these people come out against the system like this, it is crazy. Because these men and women don't know the Constitution. A lot of these actors and stuff never had a real job in their life. A lot of them that were passed around by family and friends. So that is, that is what's going on today at this point. And tomorrow night we're going to get into Article 4 of the Constitution, so that way people get that one. And people need to know what the truth is and start standing up for it. I always have fun when people put this stuff out and they bring this stuff together to the general public. They don't get all the structure of these things. They don't get the artificial structure of the system. They don't comprehend living man and woman. And everybody wants to put an opinion in. Well, opinions are like religion. Religions are opinions of somebody else's belief. So it designs what opinion you want out there, what proof you want out there, what fact you are providing. And that's what we have to do, is provide factual evidence, not hearsay evidence. So with that, we'll open up the floor. We'll see what goes on there, and then we'll go from there. So when you get a chance, we'll open up the floor. So he'll be around here shortly. So we need to make sure that people, speak up on these issues. So anyhow, we open up the floor yet? Hello? Where is my producer? Did he fall asleep? I know. I was just bringing it up. I knew you were going to scold me, but I'm entitled to that. I accept it. So, anyhow. Yeah, let's open up the floor, see what comments we got, and we'll go from there.
All participants are unmuted.
So the floor is open for anybody who wants to bring anything up. This is open for any comments today, so any angle or any way people want to go. So floor is open. Anybody would like to speak? No comments today?
Ed.
Yes.
Yeah, on that, about what you said earlier, what was it? I had it and I lost it. No, you were saying something about the grand jury.
Right.
Basically, it has changed from what it used to be to something different, where they don't usually use grand juries.
Right, they're doing administrative rules.
Yeah. How is that so much different? I mean, with them trying to use administrative rules, is it something they're trying to?
Yeah, they're covering up because they want their convictions so that way they can bring in more income, because if the grand jury met on all these cases, most of these cases would be dismissed for lack of evidence and fraud.
But then the Article 3 courts with the judges, aren't they supposed to be upholding the Constitution?
Absolutely, the Constitution and the treaties.
But then that means it would make the Article 3 judge no better than an Article 1 then.
No, because an Article 3 has to go by the Constitution, and Article 1 goes by statute codes and administrative rules.
Yeah, but if the Article 3 is trying to use administrative rules in the same way as the Article 1, wouldn't that make them just about the same?
Well, no, because the Article 1 court uses administrative rules for its personal financial best interest. Article 3 has to use it under the Constitution and administrative rules that are to protect you, not for their financial gain. Because when you file in an Article 1 court, everybody's sitting there paying. And like I bring out and I tell people all the time, and I get the information out to them, that if you're in an Article 3 court, you're not supposed to pay fees or filing fees or anything. If you're in an Article 3 court, you are liable for those expenses. So you're using their administrative rules, and you want the judge not to go by the Constitution. You want him to go by administrative rules to win your court case. That's how these people go after them, dealing with their punitive damages, against one corporation compared to another, compared to a living man or woman. Did I confuse you more, or?
I'm still a little confused, but something I'm going to have to ponder over.
Okay, yeah, because, the one thing is that we know, what is that, Title28USC3002, I believe it is, that completely states, come on, bring it up here, hang on a second. Let me bring it up here. 28 USC Judiciary and Judicial Procedure. And so when you're quoting this, you want to quote their rules of what they have to go by as in an Article 1 court or Article 3 court and how they're supposed to handle the case. And that is also, too, under there was a Title 28, and that's Section 302, that the corporation, your health departments and everything, are public corporations. So technically we own them, and so we can sue. And you can sue hospitals and stuff like this, but they don't want to have you know that stuff to protect yourself. But you have to list in that stuff from an Article 3 court or Article 1 court. You have to know and list the damages. What did it do to you? How did it harm you? How did it affect you? So you have to list the injuries, what it did to you. Okay, in an Article 1 court, they don't want to really hear all that. Yeah, and that's the one thing that, I watched so many people that have gone to Article 1 courts or gone to their state court and their state Supreme Court, and they thought their Supreme Court is the Supreme Court of the federal government that has authority over the state courts, which they don't. See, the state courts are run still by commercial financial gain. Same with the federal to a degree, but you have to quote and you have to write which court you're in. You have to present the evidence of what court you want to be in. And then the other thing that is a good suggestion that one brought up, dealing with the court findings, is that you need to know, what was that? Just had a brain flirt. I hate it when I read something else, my mind goes off on something like that. I do that when I'm doing this to bring things forward. But see, like you said, you have to file in an Article 3 court. You have to specify when you're using all capital letters on the courts, you're telling them that you are a person. You're not a living man or woman. You have to go capital letters, small letters, and then capital letters again. And if you use the correct terminology for America instead of America, because for America was the original writing of the Declaration of Independence compared to of America. That's what was altered in 1789, I believe it was, when they altered that. And so, that is the one thing. It is knowing the court you're in. And then some people have suggested dealing with going after your QVC account, filing that in probate court. So that is a good idea, but we want to make sure that we want to see cases that are proven on that. And so it's like right now I'll be getting the filing for the county commissioners out here shortly. And so that is going to freak out people when I put this, the way I'm writing this thing up and putting the evidence in it, because the county commissioners are running a private business. We know that, but they're running a private incorporation of business for profits to kidnap, hold us, steal our property, sell our land and personal assets. And technically, they don't have the authority to do that. But men and women give it to them all the time because we think that we're supposed to be religious faith. We're supposed to believe in their structure of corporation called religion. And that's how they get away with it. They know it. And some of these men and women have been publicized and publicly. Some have written books on it. Some have publicly made it publicly known to the general public. And so that is the point that we need to correct these things. And so we are working on it. All of us are doing our part working on it. And the one thing is to double check, to clarify, people know that the Supreme Court did say smart meters. You can sue them now for the smart meter on your home. And you can sue your doctors for the vaccinations they give your children. So keep that in mind, because they do that. They give your child a vaccination without your permission or knowledge. That's property damage, and you don't know what that's going to hold on that child down the road. So you want to freeze their assets to know if that child is not harmed or not. And you're going to hear these people say, well, you can't do that, but yes, you can do that. So, I mean, you have the right to freeze these men and women's assets when they're doing something that is possibly harm to your bloodline or your child or anything else. So, anything else? So, if I haven't answered that, we'll bring it up tomorrow night again. But hopefully I did, because it is knowing what it is when you go in, because that's what they changed in Oregon back in 1989, was courts that went from Constitution jury trials to administrative courts. And that's what they've done to each other, is they've done administrative courts. And they don't have a right to put administrative courts in our system. They only do that when it comes to elected and public employees, not to you and I, the people. So it is one of those things, and there is a ton of videos up, gets into court cases. I do recommend, beside the movie I do all the time, Interstate 60 to watch. And that is the one thing that people need to pay attention and watch this stuff, research it.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
You need to get the mission statement of your court, because they're corporation courts. They're not original jurisdiction courts. Mm-hmm. I'm not going through everything, but I'll just take an example. The corporation court for the United States says United States District Court. It's all capitalized. Original jurisdiction is small d, small c court, District Court of the United States, upper, lower case. They always come at you with corporation courts. And if you're going to be in them, file your paperwork in a corporation court, you should get their mission statement so you know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these court cases are corporation court cases. They're not the original jurisdiction courts. That's all I have to say. Oh, you can sometimes check that out by getting cases that are 100 years ago, because they had the right titles on them. So it would say Supreme Court of the United States or the United States Supreme Court. That's all I did was just reverse the headings in most cases. So in Oregon, it was the Oregon Supreme Court or the Supreme Court of Oregon. And one of them's corporation, one of them's original jurisdiction. It's all a con job. Everything's counterfeited. Mostly, almost everything is corporation court.
Mm-hmm.
Get the mission statements for the court. That's it.
I appreciate that, and that's a wonderful suggestion, and people need to do that. I'm still trying to get the one from my county. And the gentleman has a valid point. Get their mission statements, because now you have them in a legal contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how would you get the mission statement? Do you have to send a letter in, or do you?
Yeah, you should be able to go to your local court, walk in, and ask them for a copy of their mission statement that's filed in the Secretary of State's office.
May I?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hanging on the court wall or the wall in the clerk's office. Not all the time. And all you got to do is ask for a copy of it. People go in and file their paperwork, and sometimes it'll be right behind their back, and the mission statement is right there. They have it. This stuff is in front of everybody's eyes most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
The mission statement I sent you a copy of to get for it, it was hanging on the wall.
Right.
I want a copy of that. It was that quick and simple. That's all.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that is quick and simple, and that's the one thing we need to look at these things. Oh, I mean, a lot of this stuff is right in front of your face, literally. And so we don't pay attention what's in front of his face. That's why when we walk, we trip. And then you're wondering why we tripped. Well, there's some reason why we tripped. There's a purpose for that. So it is reevaluating where your steps are going or where you've been or what the future steps you got coming up. So it is looking at these things, and the gentleman is right that they are most of the time right in front of your face. And so they don't like giving it out. That's why, I mean, some don't. At least I'm fighting everything in my county like crazy. That's why I'm getting ready to file the ones on the county commissioners, and it will be going to every county commissioner. Because that is the one thing that we need to stand up. Go ahead. I thought somebody was going to speak. But anyhow, I mean, it is right in front of your face a lot of these times. You could even go on the internet and ask to see if it's printed on their legal system of the internet, too, of their court system. And that is one thing, we try to do here. And like I said, they're fighting me on everything because they know my case has been publicized all over, been in the newspapers and stuff. So they're fighting me tooth and nail because they don't want this stuff publicly known. And that is the blessing that people are getting it. And others are standing up. Others are filing. Others are getting it. And it does help when you listen to somebody else who's been through that walk of life before you got there. And so that does help to listen and pay attention to somebody else who's been through that argument, fight, walk of life, or whatever you want to call it. So anyhow, no, that's some good points brought up. Anybody else would like to bring anything up?
May I?
Yep.
Just wanted a little off the topic, but again, somebody else who is a lawyer with Obama Clinton ties is facing charges. His name is Greg Craig. Again, because he did something illegal as a lobbyist, but also because, again, failing to file as a foreign agent.
Good point.
So,
and yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, so again, now, as you said before, Comey, now this gentleman, and it looks like there's going to be more that's going to come because apparently Manafort is the one who's linking it to the federal prosecution for things that he's done. So I guess Manafort's going to drop a few more names, but they just brought that up about Craig being charged for doing something illegal as a lobbyist and for failing to file as a Foreign Registration Act.
Yeah, and that is a meaning that people have to realize and file on your attorney on it. Because if he's not filed in registration, the Foreign Registration Act, and you got him representing you, he can't do that. That's a crime right there. And
also,
go ahead.
Wouldn't that also be for the officers that have inconvenienced you for traffic tickets, judges?
Well, yeah, and also, too, when a cop's writing a ticket, he's doing it for personal and financial gain because that's paying his employment. And that's the one thing that people have got to realize, that he's paying his employment by being a tax collector. And that's all tickets are, is another form of tax.
Yeah, but that still brings me to the question about the police. I mean, if Board of Examiners versus Swimmer, 1957, if state cannot license, then how can they be a police officer? And then how can they carry a weapon? Because both of those two, the state licensed them to be officers, and then the state you license them to carry a weapon. And if the state can't license, according to the Board of Examiners versus Wimmer, then they're not really officers, and they are illegally carrying a weapon.
Well, not illegally carrying a weapon. They're legally carrying a weapon because they have to register a concealed license permit. But they are carrying a weapon to intimidate you for personal and financial gain and threatening your life and security and your family.
Yes, but then also, aren't they foreign agents?
Well, yes, they are foreign agents. Okay, but anybody could get a concealed license permit, give up their Constitution rights, and turn it into a privilege that way.
Yeah, but what I mean is, wouldn't that make them the enemy of the state?
Well, it makes them basically the enemy of we the people, or to the people of the state, yes. But see, when you file your paperwork, you have to express that in your filing. You have to express that they were armed, they were threatening your security, they were threatening your safety, they were threatening your family, they were threatening your bloodline. And yes, I mean your bloodline, because if you get hurt or affected, you know, male or female, you might not be able to have children. That produces and passes down your heritage. So all these things need to be incorporated in your filing. And some people say, well, Ed, that's an overkill. Well, either you want to win the case, or when a judge reads that case, he's going to go, oh, shit, let's see if we can settle this out of court instead of going to a court to make it public. And that's why a lot of cases get settled out of court. That's why a lot of court cases get dismissed because of that point. And so it's up to you, the man or woman that is making the filing of the injury, to put that in it. So that does come down to the personal responsibility of how you're putting your paperwork together. If that makes sense. And that's the whole point about putting your paperwork together. So that way it comes across rational, reasonable, logical, personable in a lot of sense.
Just not emotional.
Right. Stay away from emotions. Because the courts cannot deal in emotions. And once you accept that, because I mean, no offense, there's a lot of people that get into emotions and they expect that to do. You can do your emotions on a witness stand and to a grand jury, you know, because people do take emotions, but a judge cannot take emotions. And so it's knowing when to say this, because they already know that they already committed this crime. They already know they kidnapped and took your child without a warrant. They know that they did that for personal financial gain. And when you do that, don't forget to file them with human trafficking, because they did commit human trafficking for personal financial gain. And that's the one thing that I see a lot of people not putting that in their paperwork, human trafficking. And I've mentioned that to several people here lately, too. It's like, how come you didn't do that? And, you know, I've had people, you know, basically, you know, dead on the phone going like they never thought about it, or what does it mean? And that's the purpose of having the dictionary, looking these things up, knowing the meanings of these words. And see, that's why everybody's going after Donald Trump, because he's gone after, you know, the priest. He's gone after the bankers. He's gone after the movie stars that have claimed stuff. And everybody's panicking because some of these people have skeletons in their closet. If it comes out, some of them might even go to jail. And so when these men and women do not file their structure with the 1938 Foreign Registration Act, you have to make sure that's in your paperwork too. And I always suggest, quote the administrative rules to it. Because they will say, well, you don't have to do that because the judge knows. Yeah, the judge knows he's going to protect it, and then if it ever goes to a court of appeals or to a higher court or something like that, it's in the paperwork, so it's not brought up later in evidence. You want it in evidence in the original filings too. Because if it's in the original filings, you can't sit there and try to bring it up and add stuff. You know, because a lot of people do that. They want to add more and more to their case. But that's why I sit down and reevaluate things. And then if you have to add more, always put in the case you're filing. You know, you plan on having additional evidence filed in the case. And so you always leave that open and always put that in your filings, that additional evidence might be filed in the case. And so you want to make sure that that is in writing, so that way if additional evidence is filed in a case, all right, they're not sitting there trying to say, well, we can't accept it, or, you know, that's immaterialistic, that doesn't matter. You already have it filed that you might be bringing something else in, and that has to, you want to do that because that worries the other side. Because that's the one thing that, you know, today you have to write all your cases, you have to put all this evidence in. Prior to that, you just filed a court case back at 40, 50, 60 years ago, and you didn't have to file all this other stuff to warn the other side of what you're doing. And today, they want to warn the other side because most of them are on the side that's being warned. So those are the things that we are living with today, and the facts of what they have altered our court system. You know, that's like, you know, get their mission statement is the biggest thing right there. Everybody should be filing for their mission statements and knowing if they're filed and they have oaths on record. I mean, I've got it where we got YouTube videos with Lincoln County. We've got it where the present district attorney doesn't even have an oath filed on record. And they're able to get away with this, what they call legally, because, remember, legally is religion. You know, read the old monk statements in the 1300s when they were writing this stuff up. It was called a legal structure, and that goes back to the 1300s. England, not America, not the United States, and that actually goes back to England and Spain. And people have to realize Spain is part of the craziness. When people say, well, we got all these, you know, they got some existing treaties with Spain that give them rights to this soil. They don't have rights to this soil. These foreigners don't have rights. I can't come in your house and take your land and take your structure. That's what the Constitution is, there to protect all of us equally, including legal immigration on that. You know, you can't walk in and take somebody's stuff or sit in their chair and take over their home. I mean, you know, like these public employees are doing today. And that's why they need to have these criminal charges brought up. And that's why I always suggest to people, you have to write the criminal charges. Because if you don't write the criminal charges, that public pretender ain't going to do it for you, because their job technically is to protect the corporation, the person. And that's where people got to realize the district attorney is supposed to protect the person, not the living man or woman. And, you know, we posted court cases up on that. We've even posted some of their administrative rules on that. Unless you describe to the district attorney or your attorney, if you hire one that gives up your rights, then you have to instruct them on what they're doing. When you sign that contract with an attorney, also, too, make sure in that contract that their job is to protect your constitutional rights. That's the one beauty about the financial structure of Article 1, Section 10, financial obligations. And so you make them sign on a dotted line, and you'll find out most of them won't sign on a dotted line because they're not going to put up their assets to protect you. That's why the one thing I do suggest to people quite a bit, and I've done that over the years, is make sure you write a letter to your state representative, because they're a representative, so they're supposed to represent you in that court matter. That's technically what a representative gets paid for. And that has been brought up in court cases in history. And I got to find that one court case. That was done in 1925. That when it was done by a guy was being brought up basically on false charges, and he forced his representative to represent him in the court case that got dismissed. So, I mean, these men and women are supposed to know their statute codes and administrative rules. They're supposed to know who it applies to, and it's not to be applied to lawful Native Americans. And yes, native, born, naturally born on this soil. It's not first, second, third, or fourth generation born on this soil. It's 5 or more generations. You know, I can't go into a foreign country and all of a sudden claim that I am a citizen and I have all these rights. No, no, no. You do that in a foreign country, you wind up in a prison. You won't have any rights, period. And it's like if you're an immigrant and you try to go to foreign countries without their paperwork, you end up in the prisons because they don't take immigration legally. And that's the one thing that people don't realize about foreign countries. A lot of foreign countries don't take immigration. I think it was Sweden that just closed the borders off to anybody, including Westerners, going over to Sweden. Because they're trying to get their country straightened up because they've had so many administrative rules that they've passed, you know, giving people more rights. Or I always like this, the humanity rights. What the hell does humanity have to do anything with the United Nations? And so that is the one thing. I have human rights. Well, what's a human? Human is a definition of a person. So, you know, that's the one thing you got to look at, the definitions of what the words mean. So either you're a living man or a woman and you have rights, or you're a corporation that have privileges. And that's what you get treated like when you go to these court systems. So anybody else like to bring something else up? Okay, well, I don't hear nothing at this point. So if we're not going to bring anything up, why don't we just call it an evening tonight, and then we'll get ready for tomorrow, because that's going to be a good one on Article 4. I'd like to get more participation on that, because I do plan on open up a free forum tomorrow, because I want to hear people's thoughts, opinions, or what they're doing on their Fourth Amendment rights, how they're protecting from search and seizure, notifying, publicizing, making sure that public employees know their administrative rules. There is no such thing as forfeiture laws. Those are statute codes and administrative rules. That's theft by deception, and that's what they do to us all the time, theft by deception. So if they get away with that, that's how they get away with your personal property or even your child, you know, claiming that property is theirs, not yours. And so that's the one thing that you need to make sure that you know that your bloodline is your property. That bloodline cannot be changed. That bloodline that cannot be, you know, just passed through a structure unless it's been basically you get a full blood transfusion and you got somebody else's blood that's in your system. So it is knowing how it works, and somebody gets a full transfusion. That could be an interesting in a court case too, because you know if you got somebody else's blood and it turns out there's something out with that, that's an interesting circumstance with that one. And so I have never heard of a court case like that that's been defined to my knowledge at this point. But if there is one, that'd be interesting to dig that one up and find out what the motions, decisions, circumstances of that case turned out. So these are things that, you know, we want to look out for those type of cases too, because, you know, if somebody got somebody else's blood and they didn't do something and that blood came up in another case, and so because that was your DNA that you thought was changed in your system, you know, I mean, it does make you question. It does bring up other things, other points of view and other questions to the table. So, and other thoughts too. So, if nobody's got anything else to say, I guess with that, we'll say to the Great Spirit and Mother Earth and the Creator, thank you, bless you for our lives, and to keeping us informed. And yes, the First Amendment gives you your freedom of religion, but your religion is not everybody else's religion. So you have freedom for your religion, but does not mean that your religion supersedes any other religion, and your religion, especially Christianity, is not a foundation of this country. That's what our forefathers left England from, because they didn't want religion dictating to them anymore, because the Christian Crusades were still going on in the 1700s, and if you didn't do what the Pope said or some church religion, you were executed. They called you a witch. And so it is sad and it is interesting, but we're still living in that structure today by men and women who are not properly educated in reality. So anyhow, with that, we'll call it an evening, and may the Great Spirit bless y'all. Medicine woman.